Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Unfolding Curiosity. I'm so excited to bring you this Zentangle class. I'm teaching it for the San Rafael Library here in a couple of minutes, and I wanted to share it with you as well. Let's talk about the things that we're going to need for class. We're going to be working with a Micron PN pen, but you can use your favorite Micron pen. I have a graphite pencil. You'll notice mine's a mechanical pencil, but you can use whatever kind of graphite pencil you want. I'm going to be working with Prismacolor pencils. These are my favorite. I really enjoy working with them. But if you have a favorite color pencil set that you're working with, go ahead and grab those. Now, a lot of you know that I'm kind of a paper snob, and I have tiles that are at the Tangled Yogi shop on tangledyogi.com. They're called the Genesis tile. They're 4.5 by 4.5, and they're on super smooth paper so that they receive color pencil really nicely. However, if you don't have that kind of paper, grab your sketchbook, put a 4.5 by 4.5 inch square in there, and we'll get ready to rock. You could also use Bristol paper or cardstock if you've got a really nice smooth cardstock. And remember, you don't have to use the same color paper as me. If you wanted to use gray or tan, you can have a blast with those as well. All right, so let's get started with Unfolding Curiosity. So before we get started with our tangling, I wanted to introduce an intention for class today. And it was brought to me by one of my favorite writers. Her name is Elizabeth Gilbert, and she says, "What is creative living? Any life that is driven more strongly by curiosity than fear." And I know that a lot of the time when we're creating, fear is involved. And so I hope that you will enter class today with a heart filled with curiosity just to see how the whole thing turns out and be open to the experience. So I hope you enjoy the class. All right, so I've picked up my graphite pencil that I'm going to be working with today, and what we're going to do is we're going to start the regular old-fashioned Zentangle way, and you can see that I'm putting my dots in my corners here. This is going to help us to establish a border. We're using graphite because we are going to possibly be breaking the borders when we do our tangling, and so I don't want to be fully committed to it, but at the same time, I want to start to develop my composition. So you can see that I'm starting to just connect my lines, and I'm making this fairly dark because I'm recording today. You can make yours fairly light on your page so that it's not difficult for you to erase. So you can see that I have my square on my page there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a division of that space. So you can see that up in the corner here, let's see if I can zoom out for you a little bit. On the corner here, I've got this area where I'm going to come down about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to make a dot here and a dot here. And I would say that that's maybe about 1/2 inch across here. Okay? Now I'm going to turn this over and do the same thing coming down from the top. So you can see that I'm going to come in 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch across. Once I have that, I'm going to start to make a line that's going to come down and connect to the dots at the bottom here. Now, if you have a wobbly hand and you want to have a little bit of help, you can always pick up something like a ruler if that makes you feel comfortable. This is Zentangle, and so it's really about enjoying the experience. So however you like to get there is how you get there. I'm just going to freehand it just because that's how I like to work. And I'm just going to go ahead and do it on the other side as well. See, I'm taking my time. Pretty darn close there. Now, once I have that tube that's right going down the center here, I'm going to go ahead and do an aura right on the outside of it. You can see that I'm really taking my time. I'm still working with my graphite pencil. And I'm going to do it on the other side as well. Ooh, a little wiggle and a wobble. So now you can see that I've got that really nice area in between. And I would say that this is maybe about a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch across. I'm trying to leave as much space in the triangles as I possibly can. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start working with our tangles. So you can see that I've got my piece where I've got the central channel, but you can also see that I've got the other string inside of there. I'm just going to take my eraser and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase that other string so that that central channel is now vacant. You can see that that's now nice and open. So go ahead and do yours that way as well. So let's talk about the first tangle that we're going to be doing today. I'm going to bring in a little piece of scratch paper here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this little piece of scratch paper, and you can see the name of the tangle or the pattern that we're learning right now is called Marasu. And Marasu is basically taking a spiral, and you're going to see me come in right here, and I'm going to start a spiral. And then for our class today, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close off Marasu so that it looks like it's got a little circle right here. Now that's just so that we can put our gemstone in later. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do what we call a tight aura on our Marasu. So you can see that I'm, taking my time and doing a nice tight aura on Marasu. Coming around, that's a little wiggly and wobbly, but you get the idea. Now once I have that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to create a little bit of detailing on our Marasu here. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to turn this, and you can see that there's like a curve of the line here on Marasu, and I'm going to use that as my jump off point. So I'm just going to go in and jump off, and I'm going to do an extra line right on the inside. Now that's going to be kind of my guide. This curve is going to be my guide. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do another curve just like that, moving in that direction. And I'll do another one. And you can see that I'm turning my tile as I work with Marasu. Now some people like to do big blocks on their Marasu. I'm actually going to be doing some shorter blocks on mine. And I'm just turning my tile and kind of spinning around. Hopefully I'm not making you dizzy. And you can see as I get further out here, I'm making it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, so that when I come around, you get this kind of mollusk shape, which is quite lovely. Now, what I'm going to do for this particular piece is I'm going to come into the inside of these little curved lines right here, and I'm going to round off. See how this kind of has a hard edge right here? I'm going to round it off, and in our Zentangle world, I call this puddling, where I'm pooling ink. Now I happen to be working with my graphite pencil, so I'm pooling graphite here. But you can see that as I go around and I make those areas a little bit more rounded off, we get these kind of petal-like shapes that are really cool inside of the Marasu. And you can see why it's fun to, have a little play time with Marasu. You could do lots of different things inside, but this is how I'm going to be treating it today. And the great thing about this is if you have a wiggly or wobbly line, it doesn't show. Isn't that such a cool tangle? So go ahead and just finish this little scratch version of Marasu because we're going to start to add it into our piece. So take a moment to enjoy it. So you can see that I've picked up my original piece where we have our string here, and I'm going to turn it on its side for a moment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the center of the piece, or where I think the center of the piece is, and I'm just going to make a little dot. You can see I'm still working with my graphite pencil. Now once I've got that, I'm going to come down about, I'm going to say, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch and make another dot. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, just right there and right there. Okay, that's just going to be my guide. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make sure that this is stable for you so that it doesn't go out of focus. I'm going to pick up my micron pen. So you can see that I'm going to let go of my pencil and work with my micron pen. And what we're going to do is a little bit different in the way that we're going to build our spiral, because we're thinking about how we're going to put it into the space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right here. You'll notice I have my top dot and then I've got my second dot. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come in just off the side here. I'm going to make an arc, and then I'm going to create my spiral right here, and you'll notice that I'm just going to close it off. It almost looks like an elongated 6. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time and I'm going to start to create an aura around what I just did. So hopefully you're getting the basic idea of where I'm going here. So there's the beginning of our Marasu. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like I'm continuing. I'm going to come down and in, and you can see that I'm about 1/2 inch away from there. And I'm going to go ahead and come around. And you'll notice I'm going to hit the other side. I'm going to go ahead and do an aura. And I want to make it look like it's continuing, so I'm just going to come back and up, and I'm staying about 1/2 inch away. And I'm going to connect. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and aura that as well, so a nice tight aura. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in at about the halfway point right here. I'm going to come up and out about 1/2 inch. I'm going to arc out. I'll do an aura. Little wiggle and a wobble in my line today. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect, so that now you can see it looks like this is on top of where my Marasu is. Hopefully that was pretty clear. Now, if you happen to have a large triangle in here where you feel like you could add another aura, you could go in and add just another aura right there. All right, but for the most part, what we're trying to do is keep about 1/2 inch between each of those lines. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, so if you want to watch me again, we can do it again. So you can see that I've turned my piece so that now my Marasu is in the upper right hand corner, and I'm still working in that lower left hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come out and I'm going to arc. You can see I'm coming towards the middle of that section. And then I'm going to go ahead and close it off. Remember that elongated 6 that I was talking about? It kind of looks like it's right there again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to aura. Taking my time. Remember now, we want to make it look like we're continuing the spiral. So I'm just going to come to that inside line, come around, and I'm thinking that it's going to be about a half an inch away. So I'm trying to keep them about a half an inch away from my lines here. I'm going to arc, and then I'll go to the inside on this one because it got a little further out than I anticipated. Still making it look like it's a spiral, so I'm just going up and over. Reaching up and over. And then I'm going to go ahead and aura. And then I'll come up right where about the middle line is, coming out about half an inch, creating an arc. Another arc, and then I'll go ahead and I'll connect. Now if you've got a really big triangle down here and you think you can put in another aura, go ahead and do so. And then you'll have the 2 spirals inside of your piece, and it almost makes it look like an infinity symbol, which is really beautiful. So go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to start to add some more. So remember how in our first piece we started to make those little arc lines on the inside? We're going to do those again. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to find the curve. See how this has a little curve in here? Let's go ahead and zoom in on that. So we're going to come in, find the curve, and that's going to start our arc. And I'll come in on the inside of it, and that's going to be kind of my guide. So I'm just going to come in and create another, turning my tile, another arc, turning my tile, another arc, turning my tile. Now I'm looking at this one. I don't want to put a line that's continuing. I want to have it slightly off. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring it in, curving, getting a little bit wider as I go. Now I won't be able to do any more over there, so I'm going to come in right in here and I'm going to put one right in here. Now, once I have that, remember how we were rounding off on the inside? We're going to round off on the inside. So I'm going to come to about the halfway point, round off, and pool my ink. I'm going to round off and pool, turning, coming to the halfway point, turning, halfway point, turning, halfway. And you can see these are getting slightly bigger as I go. Halfway point, pooling, and then I'll come right up in here and grab this guy. And then if you've had the opportunity to add an extra area in here, you can come right down the center and you can see that I'm just going to come in and add a little bit of a pooling line right on the inside. So I'll just come right there and get that going. And look at how cool that is. Isn't that lovely? So let's go ahead and do that on the other side. So I'm just going to start right where I did before. Hopefully I'm not confusing you. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to look at this arc right here. And I'll put another one on the inside. Turning the tile. Nice arc. turning the tile. We want all the arcs to go in the same direction. We're just following along as we go. So remember how we don't want to let this line continue out, so I'm going to come into the inside a little bit, and hopefully it won't line up, which is good. I'm going to keep on rolling. I won't be able to do any more here, so I'm going to come right up here and do another. If you've got room to do one more over here, you could go ahead and do one more over here. So I'm thinking about the way that curve went, and I'm going to let it go the same direction here. So same direction, just like so. Now I'm going to come back in up in the top here, and I'm just going to start pooling. Just turning and pooling. Coming right in there. And I'll come right over here and get this guy as well, keeping it on the inside. So now this is looking really cool. I'm going to zoom out. Look at how beautiful those are. It almost has this kind of flowing energy, which is really neat. So go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine. And then when we come back, we're going to do a really fun tangle. This is called Peacock. So before we leave the spiral behind, I wanted to share this quote with you. The spiral is one of the most ancient and enduring symbols. It represents the winding journeys we must take inward if we're to truly know and love ourselves. From these never-ending journeys, we return with infinitely more power and wisdom. And I hope that that is what Marasu starts to share with you today as such a endearing tangle. So I'm just going to take this off to the side here, and I'm going to bring back in my scratch piece of paper so that we can play. So Peacock is such a fun tangle. It's such a pretty tangle too. So I'm going to turn this on its side here. And what Peacock looks like is, for those of you who know the tangle Flux, Flux is basically a teardrop, okay? So for Peacock, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and I'm going to create a flux, and at the bottom of flux, I'm going to put in a V. Once I have that, I'm going to give this a slight little wave in its presentation here. And then I'm going to come in on either side of the flux here, and I'm going to create these lines that are almost like auras around the teardrop shape. See how it's kind of hugging the outside line and hugging the outside line? And I'm going to add what we call fescue, just by adding a little bit of a teardrop at the top and pulling it in. Now once I have that, I'm going to make some aura lines. And it's okay if it doesn't line up. And you can see that I'm leaving a little space in between these here. So what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to come in and attach and bring an aura right in underneath, and it creates kind of that feather-like shape. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just like so. Now if you've got room like I have room, you can come in and add more fescue. So I'm going to come in and add a fescue here and here and then here and here. Now for the inside of Peacock, I'm going to come right into where the center is, and I'm going to do a little arc, and then I'm going to do an aura right above it, and I'll put in a triangle right in at the top. But you'll notice that my triangle is a little bit more narrow than the V that's below. I'm going to fill that in. And then on the top of this, right in here, I'm going to do some arcing lines that go away from each other. And that's Peacock. Super, super fun tangle. So go ahead and play with that for a moment, and we're going to start to add it into our tangle that we've been working on. Okay, so here we go. Let's have some more fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring in Peacock into our composition here. And I've had people ask me over the years how I come up with composition ideas. And, one of the things that I love to do is I love to work with these strings and play with different tangles and move things around. And, it's never the same thing twice. And so for this one, on the original piece that I did, my peacock was on the inside of the border. But for this particular one, it's going to be on the outside of the border. So it's never the same thing twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up towards the top of my piece here, and I'm going to start with that flux that we were talking about. And you'll notice I'm going to have to break the border for it. Each tangle evolves at its own pace, so yours might be different than mine, so don't worry if it's different. So I've got my really nice teardrop shape, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that little V that's underneath it, and I'm going to let it come down and connect right into the corner of where my Marasu is. Now once I have that, I'm going to start to create those fescues. Remember those kind of really interesting curvy lines? I'm going to come in right over here and right over here. I'll go ahead and do the little teardrop shapes up at the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up right in here and start to bring in that aura line. Now because this line is right here, I'm going to make it look like it's coming out from underneath it. I'm going to go in right over here and do another one. And then I'll do another one. And I'm not sure I have enough room, so I think I'll leave that side alone. I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to create that little kind of feather-like shape. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And now if you have room for fescue, you can throw that fescue in there. Come in right over here, maybe add a little fescue right there. Get that in. Maybe I'll add one right there, that might be nice. Now once I have that, I'm going to go into the top and I'm going to start to add my arc. And then I'll go ahead and add the inside of that peacock. And then remember the curves up at the top. I'm going to do a couple of those in this direction and a couple of those in this direction. Super, super fun. Go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to go ahead and do the other side. So you can see that I'm on the other side again, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with my flex-like shape. Once I have that, I'll do the V at the bottom, and I'll bring it into the corner right over here. I'm going to go ahead and make my fescues on either side. Coming in, creating those puddle-like shapes. And then I'll come in and I'll start to create the beginning of those leaf-like shapes. And you can see that I'm just kind of working my way down. And then I'll go ahead and add a little bit of weight to those just by adding the bottom aura. And you can see this one's got a little bit more movement than the other one has. Remember, not all feathers look exactly the same, so it's okay if it's a little different. And then I'll add in some fescues in between. And these are always really fun once we get our colors in there. They're really funky looking when they're kind of naked, as they were. And then I'll come in and I'll do my arc and an aura. And then I'll go ahead and add that triangle in there. And then here come the curves. Super fun. Go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to add in another tangle. All right, so we're going to start to add another tangle into the piece here. I'm going to move this off to the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a tangle that we know very well. And this is called Pokeroot. So what it looks like is you're going to have a stem, and then you're going to do a little frowny face. And then once you have that little frowny face on it, you're going to go ahead and you're going to come just below it and create the arc of the piece here. Now once you have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an aura that goes around it. And for this tangle, we're going to do a tangulation on it, which is I'm going to go ahead up at the top and put a petal, and then I'm going to let the petals jump off the sides and get a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller as they go around. And it's such a fun tangle to play with. So I'm not sure of the name of this tangle, and if I get the name of it before we finish the class, I'll share it with you. But for right now, let's call it Pokeroot flower. Okay? So I'm going to take this off to the side here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring back in our piece that we're working on. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come off the side of my Marasu here, and I'm going to just arc off just to the side. Now once I have that, I'll go ahead and I'll make my little frowny face on the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my little poke root, and I'm going to aura it. Once I have the aura, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my petals. Super fun, and it really gives this kind of a feeling of moving. You know, it has a nice movement to it. I'm going to go over to the other side and I'm going to do the same. So I'm just going to come in, jump right off the side of my Marasu here, creating that stem with an arc, and then I'll go ahead and I'll make the root, aura, and then I'll go ahead and I'll come off the sides. So that it really has that nice flow to it. Isn't that so fun? So go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to add one more tangle into the piece. So we're going to add one more tangle into our triangle areas over here. And this tangle is called Cruffle, and I love Cruffle. It's one of my mac and cheese tangles, if you will. It's kind of like a comfort tangle. And Cruffle is basically where you take, let's write out Cruffle first. So I think Cruffle is spelled like this. And it is basically a circle with an S pattern in it. And then you come into one of the sides in here and you go ahead and you aura. And you aura again. Now, I'm really into a one-sided Cruffle, but a full Cruffle would look like this. So you can see it's really a beautiful tangle. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off to the side here. And I'm going to come back into our piece, and I have room for a Cruffle right here in my corner. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little Cruffle in, and let's see how this one evolves. So I'm just going to come in right here and put a Cruffle in there. And I'll go ahead and zoom right in, and you can see that I'm just taking out that corner completely and working right over it. And I'm going to do a half Cruffle. I really love the look of it just as a half. So I'm going to go over to the other side and I'm going to do the same, so you can see here I am. And I'm just once again going to throw in another orb, make that little S shape, and I'm going to come in and do that. Super fun and super easy. Now, if you've got a lot more space and you want to add more, like in my original, I had a few different spaces that I could put them in, but on this particular one, I happen to have less. So I'm just going to leave it as one on each side. Now, when we come back, we're going to start to work in this central channel. Okay, so we are going to start to work with the central channel in here, and we're going to bring in a tangle called Batumber, and I think this is such a beautiful tangle, and this is by a CCT named Kelly, and I love this because it has such a graphic feel to it. So what it is it's a grouping of hills and valleys, so you're going to see me just do a really nice wave, and then it's an aura of the hill and the valley. Now for our particular piece, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting it into the central channel. Now what it looks like is inside of these hills and valleys, we're going to put a series of flux. Remember that teardrop shape that I was talking about earlier? Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. This is so cool. Now I know that I'm just doing this with my graphite pencil, but you can do this with your pen if you want to. And then I'll come over here and do the same. It's a gorgeous border tangle. And I know I've seen this in beautiful ceramics. Spanish ceramics definitely has that kind of flair. So I'm just going to flip it over. And get right in there. Isn't that so beautiful, the way that we have that kind of petal-like shape that just flows right down the piece. And I'll just come up over to the side here so you can see that, you know, it's kind of floating off over and in. So I'll just kind of fill that one side in. And I'll go over to the other side as well and do the same. Now you'll notice that when we get into the piece, I'm going to be doing lots of puddling. You can see we've got a lot of interstices in here, but I'll get more into that as we start to work on the piece. So let's go ahead and grab it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my Micron PN pen again. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out here. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in what we did with our string. So I'm just going to go ahead and come in right in here. You can see that I'm very gently bringing that line in. And I'll come over to the other side and I'll do the same. Now once I've got that filled in, you could do this with your pen or you could do it with your pencil, deciding which way that you want to do it, just for the sake of those of you who are feeling a little nervous about this tangle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by coming in right here at the top, and let's make sure that you can see I'm going to come over and I'm going to touch this side, and then I'm going to let the wave flow. Now notice on this side I'm going to leave a little space. I'm going to touch this side, and then on the opposite side I'm going to just move this up. I'm going to leave a little space. Same thing over here, touch the side, and we're going to kind of flow right off. Now once I have that, I'm going to come back to the top here, and I'm going to start on the inside channel. I'm going to aura, and you can see that I'm taking my time. This time it's going to touch the edge, and it's going to come back. I'm going to come right over here, touch the edge, and come right back. And once again, come right off the page. So you can see that I've got this nice flowing river that's going right down the center of my piece here. So once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just pick up my pen and I can fill it in. Now once I've had the opportunity to fill that in, I can start to build the tangle. You can see that I'm just finishing up that nice aura. And here we go. So I'm going to just turn it on its side, and I'm going to come in and start to build by bringing that upside down teardrop or petal-like shape. And I'm just going to jump down the side, jump down the side, jump down the side. Coming over to the opposite. And then remember how I was talking about puddling? I'm going to go to those funny little shapes that got in between the petals, those interstices. And you can see how this gives it a very graphic feel. So I'm going to go again. I think I can add one more petal there. And then I'll go to the next one. Coming up and touch. Let it jump down the sides. Over to the opposite. And then once again, puddling away. One more time right in here. Coming over and puddling just in those little interstices. Now you'll notice I've got some spaces in between, and I'm just going to puddle those in. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, and we'll just get one started together. And you can see that it can get very hypnotic to do your puddling, which is the whole idea behind Zentangle, is to just get you into this wonderful zone of creativity and relaxation. So really let yourself just bloom into it. I'm going to go ahead and finish up mine. You go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to work on our border. Such a fun tangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into where my borders are, and I'm going to start to ink them in. And you'll notice that when I get near a tangle, I will start to lift up my pen and work around it. So you can see that I'm lifting up and coming back in and just being really mindful of where my tangles are. And I really love having a nice interrupted border. I think it brings a lot of play into a piece, and just for me it gives me a sense of satisfaction. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. And so you can see that just by adding in the border, you have these little pieces that are just kind of falling off the sides and really just bringing a whimsy to it, which I really enjoy. And what I love about this is the energy that's moving in both directions. It's really got a nice feeling to it. So we're going to start to look at the piece, and right now what we have is it has a little bit of chaos to it, if you will. And so we're going to start to bring in a little bit of shading and color, and that's really going to bring some gravity into the piece. So let's get ready to add some color. So let's start to bring a little bit of gravity into this piece here. It's got a lot of chaos to it, and so I want to give it a feeling of groundedness. So I'm going to pick up 3 colors here, and they're warm colors. We're going to be working with the union of opposites today. So, one side's going to have cooler tones and the other side's going to have warmer tones. So I'm going to be working with these 3 colors right now, and I've got in my hand the Sunburst Yellow, which is PC 917. And then I also have in my hand the Cadmium Orange, which is PC 118. And then I also have in my hand Scarlet Lake, PC 923. And the reason why I have these 3 together is because I want to be able to get a depth of color. Many of you have heard me talk about how each color pencil is 3 different colors. You have your light, you have your medium, and you have your dark. Now, sometimes when you have a color that's very translucent like a yellow, you'll want to have an orange nearby to give you a little bit of depth. And sometimes when that orange doesn't feel like it has enough gravity to it, you can always grab a darker red. So really what I'm working with is just trying to do shading within tonal hues. Okay? So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to do some shading with this piece. Now, Some of you may have done some Zen buttons in the past with Rick and Maria, and I love Zen buttons because it's like it's a beautiful shading that has a real electricity to it. And I like to do my Zen button shading with color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start inside of my spiral here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hug the inside edge of the spiral first. And you'll notice that I'll work around those little curves that we have in here, those little details that are inside of our Marasu. And I'm going fairly lightly with the color that's in my hand. I'm not pressing very hard. Now, once I have that, I'm going to come to the outside edge and I'm going to hug the outside edge. And you'll notice that I'm leaving light in towards the center. So I'm just coming in and working my way around, going nice and gently. And then once I have that central channel, I'm going to start to do it into the outer channels too. So you can see that I'm going to start to go into the outer area right here and start to develop that. And I'll do the same thing over here. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to bring some orange into the piece. So I'll come right back to those areas where I started, and you can see that I'm just going to hug the inside area, leaving a little bit of that yellow. And I'll start to come to the outside edge and do the same thing. I love shading Marasu. It's one of my favorites to work with. And then I'm going to come to the outside edge over here as well. Now once I've added a little bit of that yellow, or rather the orange here, I'm going to come back in with some of that yellow, and you want to make sure that your pencil is all sharpened up for this. It's always nice to have a good sharp pencil for detail work. So I'm going to zoom in on this as much as I can, and I'm going to start to blend the two together. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm just running the yellow over the top of the orange in here, just to get rid of some of that scratchiness of the color and kind of soften my edge. Coming up over here, over here, getting right in here. And you can see that just by doing that, it's really starting to get a wonderful electric kind of feel. Really keeping it nice and light on the pressure. You don't have to do too much to get it to really zing out for you. Now once I've got that, you can see that there's some really nice dimension that's happening there, but I still want to see more. So I'm going to come in with my red, and I'm really going to stay close now to the black line, and I'm going very, very lightly with that color, just keeping it nice and close. And what it does is it starts to bring in the glow that I'm looking for. Not that it wasn't glowing before, but now we're really going to get it. So you can see the inside has a lot of definition, whereas the outside is missing it. So now I'm going to come into where the outside edge is and start to bring in that red. Coming in over here and over here. Just working my way around. Coming over on the sides here. And look at how that's really starting to pop, so that when I zoom out, it really brings a punch to that, doesn't it? So here it was without any color or any shading, and now we've got this really vivid piece in there that just brings your attention right to it. So I just love the way that that feels. Now if you want to go in and blend it out a little bit again with some of your yellow, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. I'm going to do just a little bit to mine just to see if I can pull around that color a little bit. But you go ahead and work on yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to start to add a little bit more to the piece. So we're going to start to bring in some opposites into this here. So you can see that I've got some blues in my hand and I have my white color pencil. So the blues that I'm going to be using today are the light aqua, which is PC992. And then I'm also going to be using the aquamarine, which is PC905. I'm going to be working with those together, and I'm going to be using the white as a way to blend the piece. So let's just make sure that we get that to stay still here. So the white is PC938, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the light aqua first, and I'm going to come in just like I did on the other side and start to shade it in. So I'm going to start hugging the inside edge first. Remember to lift up your pencil so that you're not getting into those stripes that you've created here. I am going to put a little bit of shadow right where the line is coming over the top of the Marasu here. So you can see I'm just leaving a little bit of a shadow there. And you'll notice that I'm getting that really nice streak of light that's going through the center here, hugging the outside edge. Same thing over here. Now once I have that, I'll come to the outside piece right in here. Do the same. I'm just getting right in there. Now I'm going to pick up that darker aquamarine and I'm going to start to hug the black line. You can already see the depth that that's starting to bring. Starting to work my way around. I love these colors together. I think that it's beautiful to see the union of opposites coming together. It just makes for an interesting composition. Turning my tile to make it work for my hand here. Now I can see that I've missed this side, so I'm just going to jump in there. Some of you who have been in class with me before know that I'm a bit dyslexic, so there's always one that gets away from me, and that's okay. Just practicing mindfulness, and just staying with the process. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my white pencil on this one, and I'm going to start to blur out the edges with the white pencil. I love working with the white and the blues together. It just brings this feeling of tranquility into the piece. I love working with the white because it brings a really nice pastel feeling into the colors. And so for me, it's a great blender. I know a lot of people like to use the blender pencils, but for me, the blender pencils take away the opportunity to work again if I want to work again on a part of it. So I like to use the white. I can see I missed a little bit of the darkness there, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But you can already see that this is really starting to come to life. And I'll pick up some of that blue, that darker blue where I missed it, and I can just come right back in and add it. That's what's so great about the white. You can just come right in and work right over what you missed. So go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and look at how that's already started to be really exciting and fun. All right, when we come back, we're going to start to add more to the outside pieces. So let's go ahead and carry some color here. We're going to take the colors that we used in our first spiral and bring them over to this flower called Veruca. Now I'm going to come in with the lightest color first, and let's go ahead and zoom in on this. And I'm using the Sunburst Yellow first, and I'm just going to go in and dust that Sunburst Yellow into the petals of Veruca. Now, once I have the Sunburst Yellow in there, I'm going to pick up my orange. This is that really beautiful cadmium orange that I love so much. And you know, if you ever find that your pencil has gotten a little bit dull, make sure that you sharpen it up for a good detailing in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start now with a little bit of a dusting of that cadmium orange. Let's get that off there. And just start to dust that in. So I'm not using a lot of pressure for this because it has so much pigmentation to it, but I will come in a little bit later with that white pencil. You can see that I've picked up the red now that we were using. This is the Crimson Lake, and I love this for giving it a little bit of pop. And you can see that it's going to get a nice glow to it. And then finally I'll come back in with a little bit of that first yellow that I used, and I will come in and give that a little bit of blurring out. Now I thought I would use the white, but I've kind of changed my mind with it because I don't want it to get pastel-y. I want it to stay nice and strong. So you can see that that brings so much dimension into the tangle where it was really flat before. So that when I zoom out, you have this really nice balance between the two because you've carried that over to the other side. So go ahead and do yours, and you can see I did it on the other side with a little bit of the blue. Have fun! So let's go ahead and come over to this tangle right here. This is Peacock, and I'm going to bring in some new colors for Peacock here. I've got in my hand Lilac, which is PC956, and then I also have in my hand the Dahlia Purple, which is PC1009. So let's zoom in on Peacock here, and I'm going to start with the lilac first, and I'm going to dust in the head of the flower here with that lilac first, and then I'll come down to the sides where the feather-like talons are in here. And let's go ahead and just dust those in. And you'll notice that I'm bringing in a little bit of lightness just to the edges of it. Now I'm going to come back in with some of that darker purple. This is the Dahlia Purple, and I love this color combination because it gives it quite a glow, which is really lovely. And then I'll come in and I'll add it to the internal parts of these feather pieces. Just getting right in there. Now I'll pick back up that lilac that I was working with earlier and start to blur out where the Dahlia Purple and the lilac are meeting, and you can see that that really brings a nice softening to the piece. So I'm just getting in there and dusting that in. Just like so. Now if you want to, you could come back in with a little bit of the white just along the edge in here and just give it a little bit of a blurring out with the white, which is so pretty because it gives it a really neat pastel look. Now I'll pick up some of that blue that we were talking about earlier and just give a little bit of a dusting of that blue. And you're going to see me leave a little bit of a light source in here. And then I'll pick up some of that darker blue that we used earlier as well. And look at the glow that that gets from the piece. It really takes that feather to the next level, which I really love. It's one of my favorite tangles. I use it quite a bit. So that when I zoom out, look at how lovely that is. So go ahead and finish up this one on this side. We'll come over and do some different colors on that side. Have fun. Alright, so you can see that I've flipped my tile here, and I now have the undone one over here of Peacock, and I'm going to bring in some new colors into the piece here. I'm going to bring in some warm greens in here. These are greens that have a little bit more yellow to their presentation. So what I have in my hand is the lime peel green. This is PC1005. And then I also have in my hand the Prussian green, which is PC109. Now, these two together really make a nice combination. I do love them together, and you can see that there's a lot of warmth in these. So let's go ahead and start to work inside of the peacock feather here. Now, for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in the leaves first. So you can see that I'm working in the kind of leaf-like shapes for the peacock feathers in here. And I'm bringing in the green, the light green. This is the lime peel green. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a little bit of that Prussian green right into the tips. Now the reason why I like this Prussian green is because it's got more of a gray or a taupey kind of feeling to it. It's not like the grass green. The grass green's got a lot of blue in it. But if you don't have these colors, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. You can add a little bit of yellow over the top of grass green and it'll warm right up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that lime peel green and fade out the edges just a little bit of where the Prussian green is meeting that lime peel green. And then once I've had a chance to do that, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that yellow that we used down in here, and I'm going to dip that right into the edge. So instead of leaving white this time, I'm using a little bit of yellow right over the top of that lime peel green, and you can see that that brings a really nice vividness to this. I'm going to take that lime peel green once again, and I'm going to bring it up to the top of my peacock feather here. And then I'll pick up some of that green, again the Prussian green, and bring it around the edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and blur out my edges just a little bit. And then I'll dip just a little bit of that yellow right onto the tip of it. Now remember that purple that we were using for this side? I'm going to give a nod to it inside of the peacock feather. So I've picked up that light purple. This is the lilac. And you can see I'm handling it the same way that I did with the blue, leaving a little bit of a light source. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of that purple and just bring it right in there. I'll pick up that lilac again and just give it a little softening. Now you could pick up a little bit of your white if you wanted to soften it even more and make it a little bit more pastel-y. I'm going to do a little bit of darkening down at the bottom because I feel like I've lost my edge there. And look at how lovely that is, so that when I go ahead and zoom out, they have a really nice relationship with each other. Okay, so go ahead and finish up yours, enjoy, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to work with your pieces and have them ready to rock and roll. Now I'm going to pick back up that green that we just introduced, and we're going to start to bring it into the background on the side where the purple is. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm just trying to give a nod to both sides here, and I really love the idea of bringing some of that green into this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to softly bring in some of that lime peel green inside of the boundary. So you can see that I'm just working my way through and starting to add that dusting in all the way through here. And I'm noticing that I didn't do my little V-like shape underneath here, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So I'm just dusting in that lime peel green, and you'll notice that that is starting to bring out the purple. It's making it kind of jump right off the page, isn't it? That nice contrast between the warmth and the cool. So I'm just going to turn my page here as I work. You know, I love doing kind of this union of opposites here, where we bring cooler colors and warmer colors together and really use them as contrast. So I'll come over, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up that Prussian green, and I'm just going to go along the edge. And you can see that I'm being mindful of where those little leaf-like shapes are in my feathers. And then I'm going to press a little bit harder right along the line. Now I'm going to turn the piece to make it work for my hand here. And you can see that I'm dipping down and coming in. So it's really like a perimeter shade is what it's like. I'll get right underneath that little flower in here, Veruca. And over here as well. And you can see that I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that lime peel green, and let's go ahead and zoom in on this. I'm going to come in with that lime peel green and start to just blur it out a little bit, getting a little bit more intensity in the piece. You can see that that really brings a nice feeling in there, so that when I zoom out, look at how lovely that is. That really anchors it, but it also gives a nice relationship to the other side. Now what I'm going to do with the other side is I'm going to flip, and I'm going to come over here to the other side where it's really, really warm, and I'm going to add more of that coolness in over here. So I'm going to come in with the lilac first, and I'm going to start to dust just the way that we did on the other side, so you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing. Just dusting along the edge here. And you can see that my pressure on that pencil is fairly light. I'm getting right in there. And you can already see that that green is starting to take flight right off of the page, really coming forward and showing itself off. I'm looking for any spots, and then I'll pick back up that really fun dahlia purple and start to dust just like I did on the other side. So you really do get the idea here. And I'll just finish demoing on this side, and then I'll let you guys go and do your thing, or you're probably doing it along with me here. So I'll go ahead and I'll add a little bit of depth right along the line here. That's so I get a nice shadow, so that when we go to do the central channel here, it's really going to pop right off the page. This particular piece has a lot of dimension to it. There's a lot of movement going on. So let's zoom in on this here. You see I picked up my lilac again, and I'm just going to blur out the edge a little bit. Now you could pick up your white and use that to blur it out if you feel like that's where you want to go with it. And I'll do that just for kicks here. I'm going to make sure that my pencil's all sharpened up. And you can see that it pulls that color. It really gives it such a nice pastel feel. You can see I'm just kind of working along there, already getting such a nice vividness. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish up mine. You go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work in that central channel. So before we start to work with our black and white in this piece, I wanted to share this last quote with you. Curiosity is the compass that leads us to our passions. Follow it and you won't be disappointed. The future belongs to the curious. And I just love the idea of curiosity as a quality that we want to cultivate in our Zentangle practice and in our lives, to be frank about it. I like to keep an open mind about just about everything I can, so that I can always keep learning. And Zentangle keeps me in that frame of mind. So with that said, let's move on to working with black and white. So I love the relationship that these two have with each other. It's just a really soft piece. I really enjoy it, and I hope you are too. So what I want to talk about is the central channel, and many of you have heard me mention PC1065. This is the 70% cool gray from Prisma, and I love this pencil because as a left-handed person, I tend to wear graphite on the side of my hand when I'm working with it. It just smears and smudges. And so for me, using a gray pencil instead of working with graphite has been a real game changer. Now I will have my white pencil handy. I'm going to use this as a blender for when we start to work inside of our piece in here. So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on the center here. And I'm going to come in and you'll notice that my pencil is really well sharpened up. I'm going to go very, very lightly here and start to dust in the central flower here with that gray. Now I'm going very, very lightly, and the reason for this is because I don't want it to get overwhelmed. I want it to be really soft. So you can see that I'm turning my tile back and forth. I'm actually going right over my lines. You can see that it's not really impeding anything. Now once I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the center here, and I'm going to go ahead and give a shadow down each side of the petals here. So you can see that I'm making that first petal look like it's on top of the second, and you'll notice that I'm leaving a little light in there. See how there's a little light right in here? So I'm just going to keep on doing that very same thing. And what I find is that it really starts to give a lot of dimension to the piece. So you can see that I'm just going to work all the way through here. And then I'll come over to the other side and I'll do the same. Remember to leave your light, it's very important. Can't have the light without the dark, right? So you can see that that's already starting to bring a lot of dimension. Here's where I'm going to bring in the white. So I'm just going to start to blur out my edges right in here. And you can see that I'm kind of teasing that color out or pulling that color out just a little bit, but you can also see that it's softening that first gray that I put down. Getting right in there. So notice the difference between this side and this side. It has a little bit more softness to it, almost like a creaminess to it. So just teasing it out. Now once I have that, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that gray again, and I'm just going to redefine, just very, very softly. What I love about this is that I'm not going to end up wearing it. And it really mimics graphite so well. Now I'll come into the central area right in here, and I'll start to blur out the central piece. And right at the bottom, I'm just going to give it a little bit of depth. And then I'll give it a little bit of a blur out. And you can see how pretty that is. So I'm going to treat all of my pieces just like I did this one. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine. And when we come back, we're going to send some of that gray out into the rest of the piece. Okay, so before we send any of that gray out into the rest of the piece, I'm going to do just a little bit of definition inside of the lines here. So you're going to see me just come in right down the side of where that aura is and just give a little bit of a shadow. So just a little shadow coming across. And I'm really just going pretty lightly with this because it's already going to build on top of that gray. And you can see how that brings a little bit more definition into that central channel, doesn't it? And then I'll come over to the other side and I'll do the same. So you can see that I'm dusting just along the side of where that aura is and giving it a little bit of a pop. Come up in here and do the same. And you'll see that I'm not really going that far with it. It's just really to develop that sense of space to make it pop off the page. And if you want to blur yours in, you can, but look at how pretty that is. I love the juxtaposition of gray next to color. So go ahead and do that to yours, and then we'll add some more. So I'm going to come down to this tangle right here, Cruffle, that we had early on in the piece here, and I'm going to turn it on its side, and I'm going to do a dusting of Cruffle. I'm going to work on the side that we did the tangle in, and I'm going to just dust it in a little bit. And I'm going fairly light, and then I'll go ahead and I'll give it some depth right at the bottom. Now you can pick up your white pencil if you want to and make sure that it's clean, and you'll use that white pencil to do your blending. So you can see that I'm going to get a really nice soft blend here. Now you can go ahead and take some of that gray and bring it into the stem of your verruca. Just going to dust that in. And then I'm going to switch over to the opposite side and do the same thing. So I'm using the gray as a way of bringing these two together. So I'm just going very, very softly. And then I'm going to dust it in a little bit harder right down at the bottom. Coming in with some of that white. Bringing that in, and I think that looks really nice. And I'll come over and do the stem right in here as well. So you can see that just by bringing that in, we're getting a little bit of continuity between the two. And if you wanted to, you could put them in here, but I'm actually going to do a reverse over there, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So if you need to pause me here, you can, or you can follow along with me here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the color that I had over here and start to bring it into my Cruffle. Now you could bring some of that purple in here, and I think I'm inclined to do that. So I think I'm changing my mind right here and now, and I'm going to change it up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add some purple. And I'm using the lilac first, and then I'll come in with a little bit of that dahlia purple. This is the darker one. So we're kind of dancing the eye around here. And then I'm blurring it out a little bit with that lilac again. And I'll even pick up my white. Now you want to make sure your white is clean so that you're not dragging another color into there. And I'm just blurring it out. I love the look of this. It's always so nice to see Cruffle with so much dimension. So over here, what I think I'm going to do is I'll use that green that we had, and I'll pick that up and dust that in. A little bit different from what I did the first time. Always trying different elements every time I come back into a piece. It's never the same thing twice. Each composition kind of owns itself and does its own thing. Blurring that out a little bit with some of that beautiful lime peel green, and if you want to, you can even use some of that white To blur your edge, just make sure that your white is clean so that you're not dragging another color in there. And already this is having such a nice feel. Look at that. I love how it has a yin and yang feel with the Cruffle as well. Now we can still use those same colors inside of our piece here. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take some of that purple and bring it in over here. So I'll just grab that lilac and dust it in. Notice that I'm leaving a little bit of a light source there on the left-hand side. And then I'll pick up some of that darker purple and just dust it in. And on the opposite side, I'm going to pick up that blue and bring the blue in there, just to get a little bit of a gemstone feel. Picking up some of that darker blue. Getting a little bit more going on there. Love that. Love the feeling of that. So there, you've got a few things to work on there before we finish up our piece. Have some fun, relax your shoulders, take a deep breath, exhale it out, and enjoy. So I think for the final component today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my gray again, and I'm going to bring it inside of Veruca and give Veruca a little dusting of gray. So you can see that I'm going to come in and softly dust. And then I'll go ahead and I'll give it a little pressure on the side. Picking up my white, and I'm going to blur it out. I'm going to flip over to the opposite side here and do the same thing. So real light dusting of the gray, same gray that we were using before. Sorry about that, folks. I know that got a little blurry. And then coming around a little bit and giving a little pressure. And then I'll come in with a little bit of that white again. Now you could do any color in here, but I felt like today a little bit of gray gives it that kind of modern feel. And you're going to see me blur out in my stems a little bit. I'm just going to flip it over and do the same on this side, so that when I zoom out, it has a really nice feeling to it. I love those broken borders. I just think that it's very whimsical and really fun. So go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about cleaning up our edges a little bit. So sometimes when I'm finishing up a piece, I'll look around to see where I've lost my lines a little bit. And here you can see where my gray is. I've lost a little bit of the definition of the line in here. So I've picked back up my Micron pen, and I'm not pushing hard. I'm just lightly going over the lines just to give definition to it. And there may be other places where you may have lost the line, like you can see that under my lilac and purple here, I lost a little definition. Or maybe some places where you puddled didn't get fully puddled in. And you know, one of the things that I look for when I'm looking at Zentangle art is the care that somebody took when they were finishing up a piece. And so for me, when I'm looking at it, I'm really enjoying my piece, but yet at the same time, I'm also looking for places where maybe I've lost a little definition, and allowing myself to take a moment to really take in the whole piece and really enjoy what I'm doing, but clean it up as well. This is kind of like the TLC that you're giving it. Even over here you can see some of my fescues have a little bit of white in them, so I'm just redefining those as well. So go through your piece and just look and enjoy it first. And then if something's popping out at you where you're like, okay, I'm missing a little bit of black here and there, you can add in a little bit of that black and just give it a little extra definition. So let's go ahead and put our chop in the piece. Your chop is your initial, and as you play with Zentangle a little bit longer, you'll start to play around with the chop too. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come right down in here and just add my initial right at the bottom. I like to hide my initial inside the piece so that it's not taking over the piece, but I know that I have completed it. And I just really enjoyed this composition, and I hope you did too. I'm going to bring in my first one here and float it over to the side here so that you can see the difference between the two. Every time I sit down and try these out, they're always a little bit different in their presentation. Now, if you enjoyed the class, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up or a nice review, or even better, you can subscribe to the Tangled Yogi YouTube page. This is Tangled Yogi 333. And then if you want to join us on Facebook, we are the Facebook page where it says Tangled Yogi Art Community. And if you answer the questions on the page, I'll let you in. It's one of those things where you come, you share your work, you meet other students, and we all learn from each other, which is so lovely. And it's such a positive and supportive group. But I do need you to answer the security questions so that we keep everybody safe on the page. And then finally, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Tangled Yogi on Instagram, and a lot of the pieces that I do on there end up as classes. So hopefully we'll see you sometime soon. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so glad that you joined us for Unfolding Curiosity. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi. Bye for now.